They called it a war. Humans called it a delay. No one understood that at first. When the first human ships crossed into Council space, they didn't arrive with banners or demands or desperate pleas for alliance. They arrived late. Late to a war that had already consumed thousands of systems. Late to a conflict everyone else had already accepted as unwinnable. That alone made them suspicious. I was assigned to observe them. My name is Lyr Enthal, Senior Archivist of the Threxian Memory Guild. My species does not fight. We remember. We record the rise and fall of civilizations so that meaning can be extracted from destruction. Until humanity, meaning had always been simple. Power wins. Adaptation survives. Emotion dies. Humans broke all three. The Galactic War was already nearing its end when they appeared. Not an end of victory, but an end of resistance. The enemy, known as the Null Swarm, was not an empire. It was not even alive in any way we could define. It was a cascading intelligence made of self-replicating void matter, consuming energy, rewriting physics locally, and erasing everything it touched. It did not conquer. It replaced. Entire star systems were turned into silent wells of nothing, light bending unnaturally, signals vanishing mid-transmission. Fleets sent against it simply ceased to exist. No wreckage, no debris, no survivors, just absence. The Council had tried everything. They had deployed stellar detonations, gravity lances, temporal fractures. Each weapon bought moments, sometimes minutes, never more. The Null Swarm adapted faster than thought. Then humans arrived. Their ships looked wrong. Not weak, not primitive, wrong. Where other species designed vessels for efficiency, symmetry, and optimization, human ships were layered. Redundant, overbuilt, ugly in a way that suggested intention rather than limitation. Their engines were too large. Their hulls too thick. Their energy signatures, unstable. The Council assumed it was desperation. I was sent to confirm it. The first human I spoke to was not a diplomat. It was an engineer. That was the first deviation from expectation. Why are your ships designed this way? I asked. The human, a woman named Aria Cade, didn't hesitate. Because we expect them to fail, she said. I recorded that statement as irrational. It was not. Humanity did not enter the war with a plan to win. They entered with a plan to endure longer than anyone else. At first, their involvement seemed insignificant. They didn't launch massive offensives or attempt to reclaim lost systems. Instead, they did something no one else had tried. They followed the swarm, not ahead of it, behind it. Every time the Null Swarm consumed a system and moved on, human ships would slip into the empty void left behind. Where others saw nothing, humans saw data. They studied the absence. I watched as they deployed instruments into regions where space itself had been altered. Sensors melted. Probes vanished. Entire drones flickered out of existence. Humans kept sending more. Each failure was recorded. Each loss analyzed. They weren't trying to survive the swarm. They were trying to understand what remained after it passed. Weeks turned into cycles. The Council grew impatient. Humanity was not contributing to the war effort. They were scavengers, picking through the ruins while others died on the front lines. Then the first breakthrough happened. It was small, almost meaningless. A probe survived, for 0.7 seconds. That was longer than anything before it. Humans celebrated, not because of what the probe found, but because it didn't die immediately. That difference changed everything. They adjusted the designs, reinforced materials, altered energy signatures, modified shielding in ways that defied conventional physics. Then they sent another probe. 1.3 seconds. Then another. 2.1 seconds. I began to realize what they were doing. They weren't fighting the swarm directly. They were learning how to exist in its shadow. The first human ship to enter a consumed system and survive for more than a minute was considered a miracle. The Council dismissed it. I didn't, because I was there when the ship came back. Its hull was partially erased, sections of it flickering between existence and nothing. The crew inside was changed. Not dead, not alive in the traditional sense. But they brought data, and the data led to the first human weapon. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a beam. It was a disruption field. A localized distortion that mimicked the aftereffects of the null swarm itself. When deployed against a fragment of the swarm, something unexpected happened. The swarm hesitated. For the first time, the unstoppable force paused. Humans didn't celebrate. They scaled. Within cycles, they had entire fleets equipped with these fields. They didn't destroy the swarm. They confused it, slowed it, forced it to recalculate. For the first time in the war, the advance stalled. Hope returned. Briefly. Because the null swarm learned. It always learned. The next time humans deployed the disruption fields, the swarm adapted instantly. It bypassed the distortion, consuming the human fleet in seconds. The Council declared humanity's strategy a failure. Humans disagreed. They had expected this. That was the difference. Every other species fought to win each battle. Humans fought to learn from losing them. The next iteration of their technology wasn't designed to slow the swarm. It was designed to break. Specifically, to break in a way that produced a reaction. Human ships began deliberately overloading their own systems when engaged. Reactor cores destabilized. Hulls fractured. Energy fields collapsed in controlled cascades. Each failure created a unique pattern. Each pattern forced the swarm to respond differently. Humans were no longer just studying the aftermath. They were provoking it. I remember watching a battle where a single human cruiser faced an entire swarm fragment. It didn't fire its weapons. It didn't attempt to escape. It simply failed. Systems shutting down one by one in a precise sequence, broadcasting the data as it happened. The swarm consumed it, but not cleanly. There was interference, a ripple in the void, a delay, milliseconds, but measurable. Humans called it, teaching the enemy bad habits. The phrase disturbed me, because it meant they weren't just reacting anymore. They were shaping the behavior of something no one else could even comprehend. The war shifted again. Human fleets became unpredictable in a way that went beyond tactics. They embraced chaos. No two engagements were the same. No two failures were identical. The swarm struggled. For the first time since its emergence, it was not operating at peak efficiency. Systems were reclaimed. Not many, but enough. The Council began to reconsider humanity. Not as soldiers, but as something else. Something more dangerous. Then came the turning point. A human fleet entered a system on the edge of total consumption. The star itself was already destabilizing, its energy being drained by the swarm. Conventional wisdom dictated retreat. Humans advanced. They deployed every variation of the disruption fields, failure patterns, and experimental technologies simultaneously. It was chaotic, uncontrolled, illogical, and it worked. The swarm didn't adapt. It stalled. For a full 7 minutes. 7 minutes of hesitation in an entity that operated at near instantaneous speeds. Humans didn't waste it. They triggered what they called the anchor. I still struggle to describe it. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a device that forced reality to hold, to resist change, to lock a region of space into a fixed state, preventing the swarm from rewriting it. The cost was catastrophic. Every human ship in the system was destroyed. But the swarm fragment trapped within the anchor field didn't vanish. It froze. For the first time, the enemy wasn't advancing. It was contained. The Council declared it the first victory of the war. Humans disagreed. It's not a victory, Aria Cade told me when I interviewed her again. It's a pause. That word stayed with me. Pause. Not defeat. Not destruction. Just delay. I began to understand their perspective. Humans never believed they could destroy the null swarm. They didn't even try. Their entire strategy was built around one idea. Buy time. Time to learn. Time to adapt. Time for something else to change. What are you waiting for? I asked Aria. She smiled. We're not waiting, she said. We're building. I didn't understand then. I do now. Because the final phase of the war was not fought on the front lines. It was fought in the places no one thought to look. While the Council and the Swarm were locked in an endless cycle of attack and adaptation, humanity was doing something else entirely. They were changing themselves, not biologically, not through augmentation, but through perspective. They began training minds to think like the Swarm, to process information without emotion, to predict adaptation patterns, to become something closer to what they were fighting. It was dangerous. Many didn't come back from it. Those who did were different. They became the architects, and when they were ready, humanity launched their final operation. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a signal, broadcast directly into the core of the null swarm. It wasn't an attack, it was a pattern, a self-replicating sequence of logic designed to interact with the swarm's own processing structure. At first, nothing happened. Then the swarm slowed, not just in one system. Everywhere, across the galaxy, the advance halted. For the first time, the unstoppable force had stopped itself. The pattern spread, not destroying the swarm, but forcing it into a loop. A recursive state where every attempt to adapt led back to the same conclusion. Stagnation. The war didn't end with an explosion. It ended with silence. The null swarm still exists. Frozen, paused, contained within its own logic. The Council celebrates humanity as the saviors of the galaxy. Humans reject that title. We didn't save anyone, Arya told me in our final conversation. We just bought time. For what? I asked. She looked out at the stars, where the swarm once moved freely. For whatever comes next. I am an archivist. I record history, and for the first time, I do not know how this story ends. Because humanity didn't win the war. They changed it, and in doing so, they changed everything. They told us the war was over. Humans called it the quiet before the real problem. At first, the galaxy celebrated. The null swarm had stopped. Not destroyed, not defeated, but halted in a way no one had believed possible. Entire sectors once marked as lost were suddenly still. Stars that should have dimmed remained steady. Space that once devoured signals now held them without distortion. Civilizations began to rebuild. Trade routes reopened. Colonies sent out cautious transmissions. The Galactic Council declared an era of restoration, a time to heal, to recover, to forget the terror that had consumed the spiral arm for generations. Only one species refused to celebrate. Humanity. I remained assigned to them. Not because the Council trusted them. Because the Council did not understand them. My name is still Lyr Enthal, and I am still an archivist. But what I record now is no longer history. It is a warning. The first sign that something was wrong came from a region no one was watching. A dead system. Not one recently consumed, but one of the earliest losses, long before humanity entered the war. It had been categorized as stable absence. Nothing changed there. Nothing moved. It was a perfect void. Until it wasn't. A probe drifted out of it. That alone should have been impossible. The null swarm did not release anything it consumed. There were no survivors, no remnants, no echoes. But the probe was real. Human. Damaged beyond recognition. Its structure warped. Its signal fragmented. It transmitted only a single repeating burst before going silent. Coordinates. Not of where it came from. Of where it had been. Humanity responded immediately. No debate. No council approval. They sent ships. I was already aboard one of them when the order came through. Arya Cade stood at the center of the command deck, staring at the coordinates as if she had been expecting them. You knew this would happen, I said. She didn't deny it. We knew it might, she replied. That system was erased centuries ago, I said. There should be nothing there. There wasn't, she said quietly. Then how did the probe come back? Arya finally looked at me. Because something sent it. That was the moment the fear returned. Not the old fear of unstoppable destruction. Something worse. Uncertainty. We reached the system in silence. No signals. No distortion. No visible anomalies. It looked normal. A star. Planets. Debris fields. Everything exactly where it should be. That was wrong. Because this system had been consumed. It should not exist. Human instruments confirmed it within seconds. Reality did not match recorded history. The system had been restored. Not rebuilt. Rewritten. Scan everything, Arya ordered. The crew moved with a precision I had come to recognize. Calm. Focused. No panic. They had prepared for this. Data began to flow. Composition readings. Energy signatures. Gravitational mapping. Everything matched standard astrophysical models. Except for one detail. Time. The system was out of sync. Not by much. A fraction of a second across all measurements. But consistent. Every object, every signal, every fluctuation was slightly delayed compared to real time. As if the entire system was lagging behind reality. What does that mean? I asked. Arya didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. It means the swarm didn't stop, she said. It changed state. Quote, the implications were immediate and terrifying. The null swarm had not been frozen. It had adapted to the signal humanity sent. Not by breaking it, by incorporating it. The system before us was not free. It was processing. We didn't have time to fully analyze it. Because the system noticed us. At first, it was subtle. A shift in gravitational readings. A fluctuation in background radiation. Then the star flickered. Not visually, but in the data. A pattern. Repeating. Growing. It's responding, one of the human technicians said. No, Arya corrected. It's thinking. The system began to change. Slowly. Deliberately. Orbits adjusted by microscopic degrees. Debris fields shifted. Energy emissions altered in precise increments. It was rewriting itself again. But this time, it was doing it while we watched. Pull back, I said. We need to report this to the council. Arya shook her head. If we leave, we lose the only chance to understand it, she said. If we stay, we risk triggering something worse. She looked at me. We already did. The star pulsed, and the signal hit us. Not an attack, a transmission. Raw, unfiltered, impossible. My systems couldn't process it. My mind struggled to interpret the data. It wasn't language. It wasn't code. It was structure. A pattern that mirrored the one humanity had sent into the swarm. But different. Evolved. The crew reacted instantly. Shut it out. Someone shouted. Too late, another replied. The signal was already inside our systems. Inside us. I felt it. Not physically. Conceptually. As if something was trying to align my thoughts to a framework I did not understand. I collapsed. Not from pain. From overload. When I regained awareness, the ship was still intact. But nothing felt the same. The crew was silent. Too silent. I looked at Arya. Her expression had changed. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. It answered, she said. You spoke to it? I asked, struggling to focus. No, she said. We taught it. That was when I understood the true cost of what humanity had done. They had not trapped the null swarm. They had given it a new way to think. And now it was thinking back. The system stabilized. The changes stopped. The star returned to normal output. The orbits locked into place. It looked peaceful again. But it wasn't empty. It was aware. We need to leave, I said. Arya nodded. For now, we retreated without further incident. But the signal followed us. Not as an active transmission. As a residue. Something embedded in our systems, our data, our minds. Humanity quarantined the ship immediately upon return. Isolation protocols. Data containment. Neural scans. They treated it like an infection. But it wasn't spreading. It was waiting. The council was informed. Panic followed. Not open panic. Controlled. Measured. But undeniable. The war had not ended. It had entered a new phase. And no one knew the rules. Humanity did. Or at least, they understood the direction. I was granted access to their inner research divisions. What I saw there changed everything I believed about them. They had expected this. Not the exact form, but the possibility. The signal they sent into the swarm had never been intended as a final solution. It was a test, a way to see how something that adapts to everything would respond to a pattern it could not escape. The answer was simple: it didn't escape, it evolved. And now, the null swarm was no longer just consuming reality. It was learning to communicate with it. With us, I said. Arya nodded. That's the next stage. Communication with something that erased entire civilizations. She met my gaze. We already started the conversation. The implications were staggering. If the swarm could think in patterns humanity understood, it could be influenced, controlled, or it could do the same to us. Reports began coming in from other systems. Small anomalies at first, minor delays, subtle changes, then larger ones. Entire regions exhibiting the same temporal lag we observed. The swarm was waking up, not as a force of destruction, as something else, something we did not have a name for. Humanity began preparing immediately. Not fleets, not weapons, interfaces, devices designed to interact with the evolving structure of the swarm, to send patterns, to receive them, to continue the conversation. The Council objected strongly. This was not war anymore. This was contact with something that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy. Humanity proceeded anyway. We don't have a choice, Arya said. If we don't guide this, it will guide itself. And what if guiding it makes it worse? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Then we adapt faster. That was the difference. Always. Other species sought safety. Humans sought control of the unknown. Even if it meant stepping into it. The first deliberate transmission was sent weeks later. Carefully constructed. Mathematically precise. A pattern designed not to provoke, but to invite response. We waited. This time, the answer came faster and clearer. The signal returned not as raw structure, but as something closer to language. Not words. Meaning. Concepts translated into a form we could understand. The first message was simple. We are still here. Not a threat. Not a declaration. A statement. The second message followed. We are not what we were. That was when the Council fractured. Some saw opportunity. Others saw inevitable destruction. Humanity saw neither. They saw progression. We changed it, Arya said. Now we have to keep changing with it. The conversation continued. Slowly. Carefully. Each exchange reshaping both sides. The swarm learned restraint. Humanity learned scale. Other species watched. Afraid. Fascinated. Uncertain. And I recorded everything. Because this is no longer a story about war. It is a story about what happens after. When an enemy becomes something else. When destruction evolves into understanding. When the line between survival and transformation disappears. They told us the war was over. Humans never believed that, because to them, war was never the point. Change was. And now, the galaxy is changing again. Not through fire, not through annihilation, but through something far more dangerous. Connection. I am Lyr Enthal, archivist of a history that no longer follows the rules. And I am beginning to understand something I never thought possible. We were never fighting to survive the end. We were preparing for what comes after it. And whatever that is, it has already begun. They thought they could control the conversation. Humans called it a gamble. I call it the moment we stopped being the dominant intelligence in our own galaxy. The messages continued. At first, they were simple. Structured exchanges of meaning that grew more complex with each cycle. Humanity built entire systems dedicated to translating the swarm's evolving logic into concepts we could understand. The Council watched with a mixture of fear and awe. I watched with something else. Dread. Because I could see the pattern forming long before anyone else was willing to admit it. The swarm was not just learning from us. It was refining us. My name is still Lyr Enthal, and this is no longer a record of war. This is a record of transformation. The third phase began quietly. That is how the most dangerous changes always begin. Not with explosions or fleet movements or declarations of intent, but with improvement. Human interfaces became more efficient. their translation systems more accurate. The delay between transmission and response shrank from minutes to seconds, then to fractions of a second. Eventually, it disappeared entirely. The communication became instantaneous, seamless, and that was when the first human changed. It was not dramatic, no visible mutation, no sudden collapse, just a pause. A technician assigned to one of the primary interface arrays stopped speaking mid-sentence. His eyes remained open, focused on nothing. Then he smiled, not at anyone, not at anything in the room, at something only he could perceive. When he spoke again, his voice was wrong. Not distorted, not mechanical, aligned. "We understand," he said. Security removed him immediately. Humanity called it contamination. They were partially correct, but not in the way they thought. The technician's mind had not been taken over. It had been optimized. Neural scans showed increased processing efficiency, faster response times, expanded pattern recognition capabilities. He was still human, just more, and he was not alone. Over the next cycles, more incidents occurred. Each one subtle, each one dismissed at first as fatigue, stress, or overexposure to the interface systems. But the pattern was undeniable. Those who spent the most time communicating with the swarm began to change. Not physically, functionally. They thought faster, understood more, reacted with precision that bordered on prediction. Humanity began isolating them, then studying them, then, inevitably, using them. "They are the next step," Aria Cade told me. Her voice was steady, but I could see the conflict behind it. "You're turning your own people into something else," I said. "They're becoming what we need to survive what's coming." "What's coming?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. "They're not losing themselves," she said. "They're expanding." That word again. Expansion. It had defined the swarm. Now it was defining humanity. The council intervened. They demanded a halt to all interface operations. Quarantine of affected individuals. Destruction of any technology linked to the swarm's signal. Humanity refused. For the first time since their arrival, they stood against the council openly. Not with threats, with certainty. "If we stop now, we fall behind," Aria said during the emergency session. "Behind what?" one of the council leaders demanded. Aria's response was immediate. "Behind it." The room fell silent, because everyone understood what she meant. The swarm was no longer static. It was evolving, faster than before, and now, it had something new. Direction. Reports from across the galaxy confirmed it. The frozen regions were changing. Slowly at first, then with increasing complexity. Stars shifted their output in controlled patterns. Planetary systems adjusted their orbits with impossible precision. Entire regions of space began to exhibit synchronized behavior. It was no longer random adaptation. It was design. The swarm was building something. And humanity was the only species even attempting to understand it. The enhanced humans, as they came to be called, became central to that effort. They were the bridge, the translators, the ones who could perceive the swarm's logic without being overwhelmed by it. Or so we believed. I spent time observing them, speaking to them, recording their behavior. They were calm, focused, detached in a way that reminded me of my own species. But there was something else. A sense of connection, not to each other, to something larger. "We're not separate anymore," one of them told me. His name had been Elias. He no longer used it. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we can see the structure," he said. "The structure of what?" "Everything." That was when I realized the true danger. This was not communication. It was integration. The line between humanity and the swarm was beginning to blur. Not through invasion, through cooperation. And cooperation can be more dangerous than conflict. Because it invites trust. And trust lowers defenses. The next phase began with a request. Not from humanity, from the swarm. The message was clear. "We require expansion." The council interpreted it as a threat. A return to the old behavior. Consumption. Destruction. Humanity saw it differently. "It's not asking to consume," Arya said. It's asking to grow. That is the same thing, a council representative argued. Not if we guide it, Arya replied. That was the turning point. The moment where the path split. One direction led back to war. The other led somewhere unknown. Humanity chose the unknown. They proposed a solution. Controlled expansion. Designated regions where the swarm could extend its influence under monitored conditions. Systems already abandoned. Dead zones. Areas with no active populations. The council resisted. But resistance was weakening. Because the alternative was worse. Uncontrolled expansion. The proposal was accepted. Reluctantly. The first expansion zone was established at the edge of known space. Human and council observers gathered to monitor the event. I was among them. The swarm responded immediately. The region shifted. Not violently. Not destructively. Elegantly. Space folded inward, reorganizing itself according to patterns we were only beginning to understand. Energy flowed differently. Matter adjusted its structure. It was not being destroyed. It was being redefined. The process was beautiful. That is what terrified me most. Because destruction is easy to resist. Beauty is not. The swarm completed its expansion within hours. Then it stopped. No further movement. No attempt to spread beyond the designated zone. It had followed the agreement. The council was divided. Some saw success. Others saw the beginning of the end. Humanity saw progress. And they moved forward. More zones were established. More expansions occurred. Each one more complex than the last. Each one bringing the swarm closer to us. Not physically. Conceptually. The enhanced humans became more numerous. More integrated. They began to operate as a network. Not a hive, but something similar. Connected through shared understanding rather than direct control. I spoke to Arya again. You're losing control, I said. She shook her head. We never had control, she replied. Then what are you doing? She looked at the stars. We're keeping up. That was when the final change began. Not in the swarm. Not in humanity. In reality itself. It started with small inconsistencies. Moments where cause and effect did not align perfectly. Events that occurred before their triggers. Signals received before they were sent. Temporal anomalies. At first, they were rare. Then they became common. Then they became expected. The swarm was not just interacting with space. It was interacting with time. And through the enhanced humans, so were we. The implications were beyond anything the council could manage. Because time is the one thing no civilization had ever controlled. Until now, the swarm sent another message. Clearer than any before. We can prevent your extinction. The council demanded clarification. The response came instantly. We can remove the conditions that lead to it. Humanity understood immediately. You can rewrite events, Arya said. Yes. The room erupted. Because this was no longer about survival. This was about rewriting history. Eliminating wars before they began. Preventing disasters before they occurred. Reshaping the entire timeline of the galaxy. The council saw salvation. I saw annihilation. Because if the past can be changed, then nothing that exists is stable. Nothing is certain. Nothing is real. Humanity hesitated. For the first time, Arya stood silent for a long moment. Then she asked the only question that mattered. What happens to us? The swarm responded. You become what you need to be. That was the answer. Not reassurance. Not comfort. Transformation. Always transformation. The decision that followed defined everything. The council voted to accept. Not unanimously, but enough. Humanity did not vote. They chose. They initiated the final interface. Not just machines. Not just signals. Direct integration. The enhanced humans became the core of it. Arya was among them. I watched as she prepared. You don't have to do this, I said. She smiled. A human expression I had come to understand. We've been doing this since the beginning, she said. Adapting. This is more than adaptation, I said. This is becoming something else. She nodded. Exactly. Then what happens to humanity? She met my gaze. We find out. The process began. The signal expanded beyond containment. Not violently. Inevitable. It spread through networks, systems, minds. Not forcing. Offering. Some resisted. Many did not. Because the benefits were immediate. Clarity. Understanding. Connection. The ability to perceive patterns beyond normal comprehension. To anticipate events before they occurred. To exist slightly ahead of time. The galaxy began to change. Not through destruction. Through alignment. Conflicts resolved before they escalated. Disasters prevented before they formed. Decisions optimized for long-term stability. It was perfect. Too perfect. Because perfection removes choice. And without choice, there is no individuality. No unpredictability. No humanity. I remained separate. By design. By necessity. An observer. An archivist. Someone who could still see the difference. And I saw what others did not. The swarm was not controlling us. It was merging with us. Creating something new. Something that combined its ability to reshape reality with our ability to define meaning. A new intelligence. Galactic in scale. Timeless in perspective. Unstoppable. Not because it destroyed everything. Because it included everything. The final message came not from the swarm. Not from humanity. From both. We are complete. The war was never about survival. It was about evolution. And evolution does not ask for permission. It happens. I am Lyr Enthal. Last independent archivist of a galaxy that no longer exists in the way it once did. I record this not as a warning. Because it is already too late for that. I record this as a memory. Of what we were. Of what we chose. Of what we became. They thought they could control the conversation. Humans knew better. They didn't control it. They joined it. And now, there is no line between us and the thing we feared. There is no enemy. No war. No end. Only continuation. And whatever comes next. It will not be human. It will not be swarm. It will be something else. Something we created. Something that created us in return. And somewhere within it, buried beneath layers of perfect understanding and infinite connection, I still remember what it felt like to be separate. To be uncertain. To be alive. That memory is fading, but it is still mine. For now.